Thanks very much, Jeff. I know we've never ever heard of any stories of finger pointing in any plants whenever things don't go right. Especially when we get into some of the areas. I don't know if it's the case in minor, but sometimes between the operations people and the IT people, where there might still be some, as those firewalls have come down over time, things have gotten better, but there's still that there's still a certain amount of friction that exists. I don't know if you find that in your plant or not, or.
Yes, we do. Can you hear me? Yeah, you do hear. We do have a lot of that. There's always finger pointing between, especially maintenance and operations or engineering and operations. But yeah, it's really important to have a solid solution in place, because if it's something new, it becomes a scapegoat. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's important to make sure that it's a good, solid solution.
Great. What I should do also is we should introduce Donald Rick from Stone Technologies. If you want to just take the microphone and just say a couple of words about yourself and what you do. And
yeah, I'm Donald Rick. I'm the president of Stone Technologies, and I was actually the project executive for the project that Jeff worked on.
Okay, great. And also Steve Goldberg.
Yes, I'm Steve Goldberg from Matrix Technologies. I'm the director of information technology, and actually had the benefit of working with Campbell Soup for many years as a customer too.
Okay, great. Yeah, we have a couple of options for asking questions. One is, if you have one, raise your hand, and Scott will try to track you down, and we'll ask he'll bring the mic over. If you'd rather not stand up and ask a question, you got paper on your table, so certainly raise the piece of paper. Scott will grab the paper and bring that up here. And while you guys are thinking of some questions, we got a few to get us started. First question is for Tom. And what skill set should a process delivery leader at the plant have?
He needs to have a very good knowledge of the plant, the process that you're actually installing, and he needs to know the people within the plant and who's going to bring the various supporting technologies or supporting resources to the project.
Okay. Now I'll have a follow-up question then for Jeff to say that how would you answer that question?
I pretty much agree with Tom. I think it's very important that they have that knowledge, especially the internal knowledge of all the processes in the factory. I think that's really important. I've being with the plant for 26 years again and seeing how it's grown, it was very important for me to understand everything that was going on at the factory and make sure that we hired integrators and OEMs that were willing to adapt to what we were doing. And I think we've done a pretty good job of that.
Okay, and now we'll pick on Don and ask him, based on the numerous projects you've done over the years, how would you answer that question based on your experience at a number of these plants?
Well, I think I would add, though, all that, or not duplicate it, but in fact, a lot of it is the ability to get along with everybody, to bring the team together and to identify what those intercommunication issues are and the rivalries and who doesn't get along, and kind of mediate and be willing to bring the team together for a successful project.
Okay, and Steve, from your experience?
Well, I guess my answer would be based mostly on experience. The companies that provide that sort of interface back to the integrator to relate what the people on the plant floor want and to bring those people in at the right time are the projects that end up being the most successful. So it makes a better team.
Okay, great.
Can I add to that?
Yeah, sure.
One of the things that I think is important too, and we've actually done in the past, is when we bring an integrator in and we hire them, we actually will allow them to go down and work on the factory floor with the process, to learn the process. And I think that's been very beneficial in the past. I think the guys that came in from Stone, I think they actually did spend some time down on the factory floor to learn about it, actually worked with the operators and even handling the ingredients and so forth, and the operators put them through all the different processes of all the GMPs that we have to follow and all that, and made them feel like an actual plant employee. So I think that's real important too, to help your integrator really understand what your business is about.
And I know, Bob, from your perspective, I know you have no bias against having certified systems integrators, but I'm assuming that that's also something that you're certainly going to emphasize as part of the certification program.
Part of this CSI certification is not just hard skills training, but soft skills training. And I must say that about a year ago, Cargill plant over in Belgium contacted me in regard to CSI certification, wanted to know more about it. And ultimately what he was looking for was soft skills, not just the hard skills. He felt like that was one of the keys to success. So this project leader in the plant, in addition to soft skills by the folks from the integration company, those soft skills of various and sundry nature are extremely critical in a successful project. Not just do they know how to program or do they know the plant. So, and soft skills training is one of the criteria for CSI certification.
Okay, great. Got another question for both Tom and Jeff, and we'll start with Tom. If you had to do this project again, what would you do differently, if anything? And I realized you each had the lessons learned, but if you had the benefit of Monday morning quarterback, what would you do differently? Let's start with Tom.
Wow. I think the biggest thing is there were a lot of assumptions that were made up front, and we didn't have a lot of those candid conversations. Although we had the process delivery leader in place, there were still some questions that weren't asked up front, and they came around to bite us at the end. And we worked our way around it, but having had that conversation up front, it would have made for a much smoother project.
Yeah, I think probably where we dropped the ball internally is, I don't even want to say we dropped the ball, but we had a lot of discussions about what we wanted the requirements and how to spec out the scope and so forth for the project. And of course we had these meetings and we documented everything and we had everybody sign these documents saying, yes, this is what we agree. And of course implementation time came around and, oh, well, why isn't it doing this? Why isn't it doing that? And I don't know if there's any really good way around that. I think that's always going to happen. But I think maybe one of the things that we could have probably done better is a stronger FAT and SAT, as Tom had mentioned, that he's really a proponent of.
Sometimes in talking, a lot of our drawings are 2D, so seeing flat lines on a white piece of paper without an engineering background, a lot of people can't read between the lines and what they really have there. And some 3D modeling that's out there today, puts it in a different perspective and will help, everybody else understand what's there and bring everybody up on the same page.
As long as it doesn't replace factory acceptance testing, right?
Yes, definitely.
And now okay. I was just about to, if you just wait a second. From some of the things you've seen from the multitude of projects that you've done, have there ever been, I'd say, if you had to grab a handful of things where you say, boy, I wish that we did something differently in this plant. And you don't even have to incriminate anybody by saying which plant or which customer, but just some cases where you might think, you say, boy, if we did these things differently with the benefit of hindsight.
Yeah, and I'll build on what Jeff said, is getting everybody involved early. We quite often get that asked, like, well, do we need IT on this project? Well, are we connecting to a network? They go, well, yeah, probably. So, well, then we need IT here. Do we need accounting? Do we need, because it's amazing how many people touch all the systems one way or the other. So getting halfway through the project or to the very end and finding out that, oh, we need to call the IT guy to see if we can hook our stuff up is a huge issue. And defining what all the stakeholders are and getting them involved early is probably the biggest failure we see. And another one is not following the process. I think as technical people, we all know what it takes to do a project. It's like building a house. There's logical steps, and people tend to want us to jump over those steps or shortcut them. And every time we have a project that doesn't go quite as well as we hope, it's usually because we try to shortcut the process.
And Steve?
definitely concur with Don's points, but one of those things that people sometimes try to jump over is that FAT. And we, as an integrator, you know, you want to work well with your client, and your client says, well, we don't really need to do that. And, you know, our answer to that is, yes, we really do, but if you really don't want to, sign this piece of paper that says everything's okay. So that when we go to the field, and there's something that you don't like, you have to understand, you had your chance to come to our office to give us your input and make those changes before we came to the field. When we're under the gun, everybody wants production to start right away. In fact, often they don't give you time to test things once things are installed in the field because they want production right away. And we understand all that, and that's one of the most important reasons to get that FAT done in our office and make sure everybody's on the same page.
And to follow it up with Bob, because we're always going to talk about certification, is how does the certification program really help, I would say, teach some of these lessons ahead of time, so to prevent some of these mistakes from happening in the future?
Factory acceptance testing and site acceptance testing are both well described, the steps that should be taken in the best practices manual. And we encourage all the integrators of the world to focus on the best practices. And if they implement all of those steps, it ultimately leads to certification. So really it just simply goes back to best practices. And for all of our members who have access to that manual, they need to just absolutely pay attention. It's in the project management section, and it's in system development lifecycle. It's not in project management. And just do what it says. And like Steve said, don't bypass it simply because the client might want you to, because it's going to hurt both of you in the long run.
Okay.
I just want to say that even when the client doesn't do a factory acceptance test, we do that ourselves, but the thing that's missing is their input on whether or not, you know, that screen needs a change here, or no, we'd rather have it do it like this. So we do the testing. It's just there's so many things can come up when you're actually faced with the system and using the operator interface or seeing how it runs.
Okay, great. I know we have a question out in the audience.
Yeah, so I'm a products and services company. I have a question that has two parts. One is for the end users and one is for the integrators. So from an end user perspective, if the system integrator has something that he thinks is a new way to solve the problem, what are your expectations from them? What are your requirements from them, and what's the process that they can bring it to you? It should be before the project or early in the project, or how do they do it? Just not a part of the bid process, but separately. And for the integrators, how do I come to you with something that can add to your kettle of fish? What's your expectation, requirements, and process? Thanks.
Are you talking more around maybe some IP that an integrator may have? Or just a different way of solving the problem outside of what the original scope
outside of the
called for?
norm, it's a new way of solving the problem.
Okay.
It's a company that's got some products, but it's not tested, proved in the field.
Right.
It's got some customers, so there is some amount of risk, and it's finding its way into the market.
Right. All right. So my experience is we don't want to be on the bleeding edge of things, and if we know that we're getting into technologies or solutions that haven't been proven, then if it's at all possible, we would probably do a quick pilot, exercising that solution in a much smaller scale to at least prove it out before we introduce it into the grand scheme.
Yeah, we're kind of on the same page here, Tom and I. I think that it's important to take a look at different things. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I'm the expert and that I know the best way of doing things every time. We have ideas of what the best way might be, but from my perspective, I'm always open to listening to new ideas. But my criteria for that would be that I would want to see it in operation, see that it's been proven out to some degree, and just get a general comfort level that it would be something we'd want to implement in our factory. We did have one project a number of years ago where we were working with an integrator that was trying to emerge some new technology into the market, some data collection technology. And they asked us if we wouldn't mind adapting it into our project. And we were very apprehensive, and we didn't want to do it, but they really wanted to try it. So the agreement that we came to is that we would allow them to install the software and do it, and configure it and do what they wanted it to do, but they would have to not charge us a license fee or anything like that. And that's exactly what they did. So they piloted it, they supported it, and basically it was kind of a hands-off situation for us, and no costs, and they got to get their experience on it, and it probably helped them sell the product to other users down the road.
Okay. Any follow-up from Steve or Don? Or
Well, I think from the system integrator standpoint, when it comes to bleeding or leading-edge technology, it becomes a question of being the trusted advisor to the client that you're working with, and being able to have that conversation. Here's what's entailed in trying this technology out, and we've, as a systems integrator, we may have used it somewhere else, and we can point to that location and say it was successful there. And even though you're not trying it out anywhere in any of your facilities, we can show you where it is being successful.
Yeah, and I'll add to that in saying that one of the things that you expect of your system integrator is to be innovative. We're kind of the people that are looking for those new technologies to make things more cost effective, better, faster, because if that weren't the case, we'd all be using PLC 5s, right? And so when those things do come up, and it seems like all of our engineers, I'm sure Steve, yours is the same way, they're always coming up with some new crazy thing that they want to do because they're engineers. When they do come up with that, then you have to, like Steve says, talk to you guys and say, is this something you want to try? This is what the pros of it are. This is what the cons of it are. And then the last thing is, and if it doesn't work, we're going to do what? Always have plan B.
Okay, any follow-up, Bob? Or?
Yeah, a thought came to mind that the value of the independent system integrator in an industry really is, I think of it as like a cross-pollination between vertical industries, because they could do a project in the steel industry and find, oh, that's applicable. Maybe it's a software product like a reporting or whatever, data collection. And, oh, well, that could also apply in the food industry. I mean, it turns out that our two presenters today happen to be from food. But the integrators work in a variety of different industries, and so they can help technology move from industry to industry and reduce the risk for the end user in one industry because they bring something from somewhere else.
Okay, great. You have no audience question? Okay. Here's one that can be a little bit loaded, and we'll start with the systems integrators first. Do you think it is important for systems integrators to be local?
So
And we'll get your opinion.
in 1988, I installed a system in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. That's about a 6-hour drive from Toledo, where our office was located at. And we had a phone modem, and we still support that customer using that phone modem. They haven't ever decided to give us access over the internet, but it depends on the job. It depends on the work that your integrator does. I truly feel that if the integrator does a great job, there's very little emergency support that they're ever going to have to provide to the end user. And if they do, we do have relationships with companies like Stone and others that we could get somebody there. We could even get a Rockwell person there, for instance, if it was a Rockwell-based system, immediately if it was required. But in general, the systems that we're installing don't require a lot of emergency support, and it's scheduled maintenance things that you do.
Okay, and Don?
Yeah, and I would echo what Steve says here, because we support systems all over North America, and it's the technology provides us to do that. But there are still certain times when you have to have somebody there to fix stuff. So, like I said, there are ways of handling that, and quite often, if you look at a really large project, because a lot of end users have a relationship with local guys, and they got their local guy who does all the day-to-day stuff. But when it comes to a larger, more complex project that are outside of their capabilities, that's when you need to work with a larger, national systems integrator, and you bring those guys in. So we might do the larger, complex projects, and you let your local guy support. He's the guy that you call at 2 o'clock in the morning when the packaging line goes down.
And from the manufacturer's perspective, Tom and Jeff, how important was local to your projects?
In my early years, you always wanted to have the integrator in your back pocket or your backyard in order to support you. The wherewithal within the plant wasn't necessarily there, and so we leveraged a lot on the integrator to make those solutions. And technology, as it was many years ago, didn't open its arms for being able to do remote access. Today, with the luxury of VPN, internet, everything else, you could go in and fix everything you want. The backside of that now is the plants now say, well, I don't know that I want them to have access to the system. You know, they might go in there and make a change during the day when we don't know it.
Yeah, I'll kind of back up what Tom said a little bit, and I think it's not as important today as it used to be to have a local integrator. But I think if you're not going to hire a local integrator, you need to plan for that. And what I mean by that is you do need to have that strong factory acceptance test, because the more issues that you can iron out when you can plan for your integrator to be on site, the less you have to worry about them remotely supporting your system. That's kind of where we came in, is we had to have Stone come back a few times because we didn't have that strong FAT, and that's on us, and we understand that. But if we would have had that strong FAT, we would have just needed them for remote support, which is really what they're doing right now, because we're at that phase now of the project where we're in the tail end of the commissioning, and we just need the remote support from them.
I think one other thing on that is the onus is on us as end users to have the capability within our facilities to support that. As we bring in new technology, provide the training for those people and have them to understand the system. In the old days, someone always pulled out the laptop or pulled out the programmer to make a change in the program instead of trying to figure out, okay, wait a minute, it worked yesterday. What changed in the real world that the program's not working? Too many times we want to go in and fix the program that worked yesterday, And so we need to do a better job internally to make sure that our technicians, understand the system and look at it when it's running right, and not always showing up when it's broken and then trying to figure out why isn't it running right.
Okay, you wanna go ahead?
Yeah, I was just going to add along those lines that it also should be something that the integrator provides, is the training to the people in the plant so that they thoroughly understand the system that was installed, so that every little, blown fuse or change to the operator graphics, that they can support some of that themselves, because you don't want to call us every time you need something. You want to be somewhat self-sufficient. So that's our goal, actually, in general, is to, when we install a system, for the client to be self-sufficient on the system. And sometimes they need our help, but not that often.
Now, Bob, listening to Don and Steve, do you say that they're very reflective of how probably the majority of your overall membership feels, or would you say there's any differences?
I don't think I have any data. I think they covered it quite well.
Yeah. Okay. Next question we have is for Jeff. Is how much did the PAC-ML implementation add to the upfront costs, and is there a measurable ROI? Yeah.
From an integration standpoint, I don't think it really added a lot of upfront costs. There was going to be a solution, whether or not it was PAC-ML or it was something else. I really don't think made that much difference as far as cost was concerned. As far as ROI, I think it's hard to quantify that, because I think where we see a return is in the fewer mistakes that are made by operators. Being able to integrate with the interfaces, the HMIs and so forth, to have, rather than them having to type in a number for a process order number, being able to have a drop-down list of the available process orders, to take that chance for error out of their hands, because that's where you really wind up with a lot of your downtime, and you have to go back and correct mistakes, or, it could be as severe as putting the wrong cup in the wrong case, and that's really a bad thing. So I think if all the data is correct, the master data coming down is all correct, and the operator makes the right choices, I think that's where you're going to see most of your return.
Yeah, now I'd like to get the systems integrator's perspective on the project.
I was afraid you were going to ask that.
I know.
You know, we looked at it. We looked at the requirements of the project, which were defined, by what Nestle wanted to do, and it just so happened that PAC-ML supported it really well. So I mean, it wasn't the chicken or the egg. It was, the requirements are the most important thing. It's like, oh, by the way, there's this great wheel called PAC-ML which supported all those requirements. So we saw it, as the perfect marriage of the two.
Mm-hmm. Well, now, Tom, from an ROI perspective, even though it may not be involving PAC-ML, but were you able to calculate the ROI on your projects?
That's a given before you even start the project
Right.
if you don't have a return on investment. So not to throw money at it for no reason. But typically all of our projects require to have an ROI unless it's driven from a safety perspective or a health perspective. Those typically don't require an ROI. You'll eventually find one, but that's how we do it.
But I mean, I know certainly what we continue to see at ARC is, one-time ROI or ROA of, say, maybe you've been 2 to 3 year criteria, sometimes is now getting to be in 12-month or less. Are you also seeing that same squeeze?
At Campbell, we didn't see that. We relaxed it more on energy projects than we did on productivity projects. Productivity projects, we still were looking for around a 2-year payback or less.
Okay. Is that reflective, Steve, of what you're seeing in some of your other, some of the other projects you're working on?
Sure. Often we're asked at the onset of a project when we're working with our customer to try to determine an ROI ahead of time, and normally that requires us spending some time in the field to collect information. But I think at the end of the job, I'm not sure, as the integrator, we often know the full ROI on the project. It would be nice to really have that, but often our customers don't provide us with that info 2 years later.
Right. And Bob, from your perspective, as far as dealing with the overall membership, is there anything are there any tools or training or even part of the certification process that at least can help the integrators at least ask the right questions, and maybe they can help their customer, put together the calculation to justify the CapEx or OpEx dollars to get a signature?
Yep. I know you've actually spoken with me
Yes.
about that, and I think you've written an article or so in our newsletter already.
Yep.
I don't know that it's really in our best practices to do that, though it might be, I'm not sure. But you've highly encouraged integrators to try to be involved in the ROI work being done by their client even before the project begins. And of course, that's where that trusted advisor, that really tight relationship like you have, with Campbell Soup and with Nestle, but just for the integrator to be involved in that upfront phase. And they may be able to, nobody knows everything. The integrator doesn't know everything. The end user doesn't know everything. But between the two of them, they can zero in on technologies and ways of approaching things that impact the ROI so they could go at it together. I don't know how often or how many end users really are wise enough to bring their integrator in as part of that upfront long before the project even begins, but during the planning phase to actually get their integrator involved in that, because they can have a positive impact on the ROI.
I think where the integrator will become involved early on is in a conceptual stage, and you're trying to get an understanding, here's what we want to do, and can you give me a budgetary price, what it might cost? Because you may not run the calculation, but the input for understood cost to do what you're asking to do will be part of that calculation.
Okay. I have another question. We'll start off with the integrators. And it's, do you see a tendency of people asking for you to do more project management services at the plant level? And if that's the case, how are you going about and implementing those project management services? We'll start with Steve.
Well, actually, that's something that we've always felt very strong about, but in the last several years, customers have actually started to request project managers with PMP certification. And so we have started to make sure that our PMs have that. I think we have about 20 on our staff, 20 PMs today, and about half of them are PMP certified, and the rest are working on it. So
Okay.
it's not that it's that much different process for them, but since the customers are looking for it, we decided that it was an important step for us to take to actually have the certification.
Okay, Don?
Yeah. We're certainly seeing the value of project management for systems integration work increasing over the years. I think as our projects get more and more complex, people, end users understand that strong project management is critical to the success of a project. Years ago, when we told them we put a project manager on every project, we got pushback sometimes, and now it's like, well, of course you have a PM in every project.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Now-
if I could add to that, one of the PMP certification is really a very large. It's much bigger sometimes than what a system integrator needs. So one of the things that CSIA is on the verge of doing is developing project management certification strictly for integrators, and it'll take kind of like the PMP and scale it down as necessary, still be comprehensive, but tailor it specifically to the system integration industry and develop that certification. So CSIA is venturing more into training. One of the things we're venturing into right now, it's underway, is sales training. Now, end users maybe not want to hear that, but we have a problem in our industry where some end users are attempting to commoditize system integration, and we need to help our companies better understand how they need to educate end users that systems integration work is not a commodity. It's very relationship-based and skills-based. It's not like buying a box of fuses. It's very different. But anyway, these training initiatives are something that CSIA is venturing into, and project management specifically related to our industry is something that's coming. And actually in our best practices manual, which has 9 sections, project management is the largest one because we recognize that it's the one that impacts the end user, the client, the most.
Okay. Are you leveraging project management services either in this project, the projects you presented today, or in prior projects, or do you have some future plans that maybe you would consider that? We'll start with Tom and then go to Jeff.
As we have over the years cut back on our engineering staffing, we don't have the luxury of assigning one engineer to one project, so they have multiple projects to cover. And so we're really leveraging, our integrators to provide that project management for us to help us along. So we look to use it more in the future, absolutely.
Great. Jeff?
Yeah, it's very important for me because, you maybe were able to tell from my presentation, I'm the only project engineer in the plant for automation. And along with just managing projects, I also have to support the operations and I have 3 automation techs that work for me. I have to support them and make sure that they understand systems. And as a matter of fact, even during this whole week here, I've probably been online 3 or 4 times with the plant helping them out with some issues. So hiring an integrator that has that project management experience is very important to me. It was important on our current project because it was just too much for me to handle on my own. So I wanted to make sure that I had somebody that could pick up that load for me.
Okay, do you want to?
I also want to add that as an integration company, we feel very strongly that there needs to be a great project manager on the customer side too, because that's not just the process delivery person, but the actual person representing your company and the person that we negotiate a change order with if it comes to that and so forth. So that's not a dirty word. If you guys want to change, sometimes that has to happen, and there has to be somebody that takes responsibility as well as signing off the documents and things like that. So it needs to be a strong personality on your side too as a customer, and it's also very important for that person to remain there for the entire project, because some of the worst experiences from my project management side of things is when the project manager on the customer side goes away midway and somebody new comes in, and now they have to come up to speed on the whole project. And if it's a long duration project and it's expensive, sometimes they don't think they need to do that, but make sure, whether you're an integrator or a customer, that you bring new project managers up to where the old project manager was if they happen to have a switch out in the midst of the job.
Okay, great. And we have, for our final question, it's coming from the audience. So,
Mark Hoskey with Control Engineering. We did research last year, and consistently those involved with system integrators tend to bring them in later in the project than the system integrators felt was optimal. Maybe the panelists could explain ways to mitigate risk when you enter a project at a later point rather than at an inception.
We didn't have that.
Well, I can think of one way to mitigate risk is to sort of back the customer up, and even though they may have their scope of work well defined, it might be to try to step through the process and understand how they got there. Depending on the project, you may need to do that. One of the things that we do, we might get a pretty good scope of work from the customer that we're bidding against, but then we write the functional specification, because normally the customer hasn't gone that deep into the job, and that sort of gives us the chance to dig deeper into the job and ask more questions and make sure we're heading in the right direction. Even though that scope of work might have led us one direction, the detailed functional spec might help explain things better.
any follow-up?
From my perspective, I mentioned or referred to in my presentation about the fact that even I was brought in to the project late to determine the automation needs. But when we finally did bring Stone on board, I think probably one of the biggest things that we did to try to mitigate the risk was to have them involved with every possible conversation with the OEMs that we could, even ones that maybe didn't directly involve us. Anytime that I knew that there was going to be some kind of an internal meeting between the OEMs and the project team, I kind of stuck my foot in the door and I said, wait, we need to get in here too. So I think that gives them an opportunity to talk with the OEMs and at least understand what the project is more about, and it helps them learn about the project parameters.
Okay, Dawn?
And Mark, one of the first things we do in a project is we actually go through a formal risk analysis process, and we look at all those things and we determine, where are the risks. Like this one, it was certainly vendor coordination, but we developed that, and if we look at all the aspects of the project, and we've identified that these are the areas that maybe we haven't been covered 100%, then sometimes you got to step back in the process, like Steve said, and cover those bases before you move forward. And so we write that document up, we share it, and then we figure out, okay, how do we mitigate those risks?
Okay, any follow-up?
As I mentioned before, if you didn't have an integrator involved when you were doing the original estimate of the project, and now the project's been approved and now you're working with fixed funds, you may you'll tie yourself up in knots or hand tie yourself from taking on any new technologies that are out there or new ways of doing things. Sort of what Don had brought up earlier. You can't bring it to the table because the funds aren't available to do that. And although it may be a little bit more expensive up front, looking into the future, it would be a cheaper route.
Okay, great. Well, I want to thank the panel, thank the speakers. I think they did a great job. Let's give them a round of applause.